What if the end of the universe wasn't destruction, but a choice? A lone survivor, fused with AI, becomes the only being capable of remembering every version of reality, while the multiverse spirals toward collapse. This is not just science fiction. This is a journey through love, sacrifice, memory, and what it means to be human when everything else falls away. You're about to experience an epic like no other. Welcome to the Keeper of Threads. The room smelled of ozone and freshly soldered circuits, a metallic tang that clung to the air like static. At the center of the Nova Research Facility, beneath layers of concrete and steel, something impossible was about to happen. The room itself looked like the womb of some colossal machine. Cables snaked across the floor like veins, and the cold light from dozens of monitors cast eerie reflections on the glass panels that encased the core of the project. Dr. Ansel Hill stood with his arms crossed, eyes fixed on the glowing ring of the chronocore, the world's first functional time displacement engine. This was no longer theory or simulation. This was real, and the room buzzed with it. Every keystroke, every flickering graph on the screen, every breath taken by the team was building toward one moment, the moment time itself would bend. Vitals are steady, neural tether is green, heart rate 122 BPM, said Mei Zhang, the lead neural interface specialist, reading from her display. Across the room, inside a transparent stabilization chamber, a young woman sat motionless, strapped into a biosuit laced with filaments of quantum fiber. Her name was Sarah Grayson, a former aerospace engineer turned volunteer for humanity's most dangerous scientific experiment. She looked calm, but Ansel could see the tension in her jaw, the way her fingers clutched the armrest, just barely. "You still sure about this?" Ansel asked over the intercom. Her voice crackled through the speaker. "I've lived every day with the weight of one decision. If there's a chance to change it, even if it kills me, I'll take it." Ansel didn't respond. He knew that look. It wasn't just determination, it was desperation. He turned to the console. "Spooling up the field, we have 10 seconds. The circular chamber began to glow from within, soft at first, then brighter, until the space behind Sarah blurred, like heat rising off asphalt. The device wasn't teleporting her body, it was displacing her consciousness into her younger self, anchored to a moment in her personal timeline she had chosen. The day she failed to prevent the AI malfunction that killed 137 civilians in New Kyoto. 5 seconds. Pulse sync initiated. Ansel glanced once more at the quantum matrix readout. Stable. For now. 3, 2, 1. Engage. The light exploded. Not outward, but inward, collapsing into Sarah's chest like a neutron star. She arched against the harness, her eyes wide, her mouth open in a silent scream. Then, darkness. Ansel's fingers hovered over the emergency abort button. He hesitated, then suddenly all systems stabilized. A moment later, Sarah gasped as if surfacing from deep underwater. She blinked. Looked around. "It worked," she whispered, disoriented. "I was there, I saw it, I felt it." Her voice trembled. Relief washed over Ansel, until the lights flickered. Not the usual flicker of faulty equipment, but something deeper. The world shimmered just for a second, as if everything in the room had glitched. His eyes scanned the monitors. Something was wrong. The timeline had resynced, but not to their timeline. "Mai?" Ansel asked, but she wasn't at her station. Neither were the other techs. The chairs were empty. And then he saw the skyline through the glass ceiling. The world outside was not the one they had left. Towering spires pierced the clouds like obsidian teeth. Flying crafts, sleek and silent, glided between monoliths carved with glowing alien script. The air shimmered with particles that bent the light unnaturally. This was Earth, but not their Earth. Not anymore. Ansel staggered back. Sarah was staring out the glass with him. "What did you do?" he whispered. I only changed one moment," Sarah said. "I stopped the launch of the defense AI. That's all. That AI prevented the second invasion. If it never existed..." The room began to shake. From behind them, the door hissed open, not with a click or a mechanical swish, but with a sound like fabric tearing. And from the hallway, they came. Figures, humanoid in shape but stretched, blurred at the edges like corrupted data. They wore black, skinless suits that shimmered like oil in water, and their faces were blank, save for a vertical slit where the eyes should be, a pale, glowing line that never blinked. "Chrono breach detected," one of them intoned, their voice layered with static and inhuman resonance. "Hostile realignment initiated." Sarah backed away. "What are they?" They're timekeepers, temporal correction agents. No one's ever seen one before, Ansel said, breathless. I thought they were just theoretical. Ansel, Sarah whispered, gripping his arm like, they're not here to watch. The lead entity stepped forward. You have altered an access point. Restoration protocol now in effect. You are both deemed anomalies. They raised their arms, and the air rippled like water. Ansel reacted instinctively, grabbing Sarah's hand and bolting toward the emergency stairwell. The walls around them began to fracture, not physically, but conceptually. Time, reality, memory itself cracked and twisted, and the world distorted into fragmented snapshots. 1 second, they were in a stairwell, the next, in a burning forest. Then a frozen wasteland, then a place of nothingness. The device hadn't just changed a moment, it had collapsed certainty. They stumbled into a hallway that remained consistent long enough for them to catch their breath. Doors stretched off into infinity. Ansel turned to Sarah, panting. We didn't shift the past, we broke it. The hallway seemed endless. It stretched in both directions, an architectural impossibility carved from obsidian and glass, glowing faintly with pulsating veins of light embedded in the walls. No doors, no signs, no corners. Just one long corridor that curved subtly in a way that made it feel like they were walking inside a giant coil of DNA. Ansel's boots echoed sharply against the polished floor, though he couldn't see the source of light that illuminated their path. Sarah followed close behind, eyes darting from wall to wall, heart still pounding from the temporal chase they had narrowly escaped. What is this place? She whispered. Ansel didn't answer right away. His mind, still racing, tried to organize a universe that had stopped obeying its own rules. This isn't a place, he finally said, voice low. It's a boundary. We're between timelines, on the edge of reality. They kept moving, even though neither knew where they were going. Behind them, the hallway flickered, not like a power failure, but as if the corridor itself was being rewritten, moment to moment. It felt unstable, like walking across a dream that hadn't made up its mind yet. Then they heard it. A low, rhythmic sound, thud, 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 coming from deep ahead. Not footsteps exactly, but something bigger. Heavier. Sarah grabbed his arm. Do you hear that? Ansel nodded, slowing their pace. Then came the whisper. Not a voice, but something far worse, a memory that wasn't theirs. It invaded Ansel's thoughts without warning. His mother dying in a hospital bed, whispering something he couldn't understand. A desert war he'd never fought in. A child calling him father. A child that never existed. He stumbled. Sarah caught him, eyes wide. Ansel? What was that? I don't know, he said, breathing hard. But it wasn't real, or maybe it was, from another version of me. More whispers flooded in, flashes of grief, joy, fear, all scrambled, all intrusive. Sarah gasped and clutched her head. It's in my mind, she hissed. They're not memories, they're echoes. Of alternate selves, Ansel said. This corridor, it's feeding us fragments from different timelines. Some version of us lived these moments, and now they're bleeding into our minds. The architecture shifted again. Ahead, the corridor split in two, one side bathed in cold blue light, the other in warm amber. The sounds of the echoes faded as if silenced by the decision waiting before them. What now? Sarah asked, clearly shaken. Ansel hesitated, his scientist's brain trying to calculate probabilities, variables, but this was beyond equations. It was something older, more primal. We choose, he said, and the corridor becomes what we choose it to be. Sarah stepped toward the blue side. This feels familiar. Ansel nodded and followed. As they stepped through, the corridor changed instantly. No longer smooth and alien, it now resembled a forgotten subway tunnel. Grimy, flickering lights, graffiti, and languages they didn't recognize scrawled across the walls. A gust of wind blew past them, but there were no vents, no trains. Then they saw it. At the end of the tunnel, hunched over like a gargoyle, was a creature that had once been human. Its spine jutted out unnaturally, wrapped in metallic tubing, its flesh stretched thin across exposed cybernetics. Its face was hidden beneath a glass dome, and wires trailed behind it like synthetic hair. The thing was muttering, twitching, tracing patterns in the dust with long, insect-like fingers. Ansel raised a hand to stop Sarah. That's a splicer. A what? I've read about them. They're timeline addicts. They splice fragments of alternate lives into their own minds. Eventually, they lose track of who they were or what they are. As if hearing them, the splicer raised its head. Its eyes, if they were eyes, glowed with swirling galaxies. You do not belong, it rasped, voice a chorus of mismatched tones. You carry fractures. We don't want trouble, Ansel said cautiously. We're trying to find our way out. There is no out, the splicer whispered. Only deeper in. The keepers are hunting. You made a breach. You let the rupture grow. Do you know how to fix it? Sarah asked, her voice strained but hopeful. The splicer laughed, a wet, crackling sound. Fix? No. But I know where it began. I saw it. It lifted one arm and pointed to a glyph scratched into the wall, a triangle within a circle, intersected by a spiral. The signal, it hissed. It's calling. Across all versions. One voice, one warning. The collapse is coming. Ansel stepped forward, pulse accelerating. Collapse of what? The splicer twitched violently, then slammed its head into the wall, again and again. The now, the always, the root. Its final words. Then it disintegrated into ash and wire, as if its body had reached the end of its threadbare existence. Silence. The wind returned, stronger now, and with it a deep vibration in the floor, a pulse, steady and unnatural. We have to move, Ansel said. There's something here, something worse than timekeepers. They sprinted down the tunnel, which now pulsed like a throat-swallowing light. The walls melted from concrete to bone-white structures, veins pulsating underneath. At the end of the tunnel stood a door. Not a mechanical one, but something that looked like it was grown rather than built. Organic, breathing. Sarah hesitated. Do we open it? We don't have a choice. He placed his hand against the surface. The door recognized him. It responded. The membrane parted, revealing a chamber far larger than should have fit behind it. Inside were hundreds, no, thousands of spheres suspended in vertical shafts of light. Each sphere pulsed with a heartbeat, and within each one floated a version of Ansel or Sarah, some older, some dead, some wildly altered by choices neither of them could fathom. A hushed voice spoke from the chamber, not from any mouth, but from the walls, from the very structure of time. This is the Garden of Variance, the seed of every version, the source of all deviations. They stood at the center of a cosmic library of selves. Sarah took a trembling step forward, her hand brushing one of the spheres. It lit up, showing her in a white lab coat, laughing with someone who was never born in this world. Tears welled in her eyes. That's my daughter, she whispered. Ansel saw himself too, old, gray, peaceful, on a farm, retired. Happy. They both looked around, awed and overwhelmed. But their wonder was interrupted by the distant howl of distorted energy, reverberating through the corridor behind them. The keepers had found them, and they were not coming alone. The chamber dimmed as the echoes of the keeper's arrival reverberated through the Garden of Variance. Each pulse was like a tremor across time itself, causing the memory spheres around Ansel and Sarah to flicker. Some glowed brighter, some went dark entirely. A few cracked open like eggshells and collapsed into nothing. They're destabilizing the garden, Ansel muttered. The keepers aren't just tracking us, they're dismantling every version of us that shouldn't exist. Sarah stepped back, her breath quick and shallow. We need to move. Now. As if answering her fear, the glowing walkway before them lit up. An arrow made of light stretching deeper into the structure. The walls shifted, reshaping themselves into a spiral corridor that descended downward. With no time to weigh alternatives, they ran. As they moved, the garden above them groaned, a cosmic cry of collapsing possibilities. The deeper they went, the colder it became. Not the physical cold of weather, but a chill that sank into memory, into meaning. The lights dimmed and then vanished. Only their own breaths remained, echoing in total darkness. Then, light, a soft, golden glow ahead. They emerged into a vast cavernous chamber unlike any before. The ceiling stretched into a dome lit with constellations not from any known sky. Floating platforms hovered mid-air like stepping stones across a starless void. And at the center, atop the largest platform, sat a single entity. It wasn't human, but neither was it alien in the traditional sense. The warden was tall and robed in threads of living light. Its head was encased in a semi-transparent sphere filled with constantly shifting symbols, like a language made of thought. It radiated both intelligence and sorrow, an eternal custodian of a truth too heavy to carry. You have entered the deep archive, it said. Its voice wasn't spoken aloud, but heard directly in their minds like a dream. We didn't mean to, Ansel replied, though his words felt inadequate. We're trying to correct a breach. We thought if we could trace the distortion to its root. There is no root, the warden said, only branches upon branches. What was altered cannot be reversed. It can only be managed. Managed how? Sarah stepped forward, fists clenched. We didn't ask to shatter the timeline. We didn't know what we were doing. The warden turned its glowing head toward her. All actions echo. Even ignorance reshapes the current. Sarah felt shame bubble up, but she pushed it down. Then help us fix it. Tell us how. The warden paused. Then the air shimmered around them and a memory unfolded. Not a personal one, but a universal one. They saw Earth, billions of years compressed into moments. They saw civilizations rise and fall, humans evolve and diverge, AI reach sentience and transcend. They saw first contact, first war, first peace. They saw a single moment, a young woman halting the launch of an AI defense protocol. The moment Sarah changed. And they saw what came after, an Earth unshielded, invaded by a species from a parallel vector of existence, not from space, but from time itself. The Zirkai, beings that fed not on matter or energy, but on narrative, on the threads that made timelines coherent. They didn't destroy planets, they made stories unhappen. Your alteration weakened a temporal boundary, the warden said. The defense AI was not only a shield, it was a narrative anchor. Without it, the Earth became vulnerable to incursion. Sarah shook her head. We were trying to save people. I just wanted to stop a mistake. You stopped one, the warden said, and invited another. Ansel stepped in. If the breach can't be undone, then what's the path forward? There must be one. The warden turned its attention to him. There is a mechanism, ancient, older than humanity. The Axis engine. It exists outside linear time. It can consolidate timelines, but at a price. Sarah swallowed hard. What price? Convergence, the warden replied. Every version of you, every echo, every possibility must be pulled into one. You will become a singular narrative thread, a fixed point, immutable. Ansel understood instantly. We'd lose all alternate futures, all possibilities. We'd become trapped in one fate. But, the warden added, it would seal the breach. Silence fell between them. Sarah stared into the void beyond the platform. Can we at least choose the version of ourselves we become? No, the warden said. The Axis engine chooses, based on stability, not desire. A deep, low rumble shook the chamber. The constellations overhead blinked out, one by one. They are coming, the warden warned. The Keepers have breached the perimeter. They mean to erase you before convergence can be enacted. From above, the darkness twisted. Long, skeletal figures descended like angels of entropy, each one dragging a trail of unformed time behind them. They were closing in fast. The warden raised a hand, and the floating platforms began to align, forming a bridge toward a single glowing aperture in the distance. That is the Axis gate. It will take you to the core. Ansel grabbed Sarah's hand. No time to hesitate. They ran, leaping across the platforms, each step a flash of memory. Laughter, death, war, love. Sarah saw herself as a soldier, a politician, a childless wanderer, a hero, a traitor. Ansel saw himself dying young, or never discovering science at all. Behind them, the Keepers moved in silence, effortless and perfect at erasing the platforms as they stepped across them. One misstep, one moment too slow. That's all it would take. But together, heart pounding, they reached the gate. It pulsed, silver light and gravity wrapped into a singularity. They turned to face the warden one last time. Will we remember who we were? Sarah asked. The warden gave no answer. Ansel looked at her. Ready? She nodded. They stepped through and the universe folded in on itself. There was no sensation of falling, no pain, no motion, just absence. Ansel and Sarah passed through the Axis gate like thoughts drifting across the membrane of a dream. For a long moment, they had no bodies, no weight, no memory, just echoes swirling inside a consciousness without form. A static hum enveloped them, vast and eternal like the background radiation of creation itself. Then, with a jolt like lightning snapping into bone, they returned. Ansel collapsed to a metal floor slick with condensation. His lungs seized as they tried to remember how to breathe. Sarah landed next to him, coughing violently, drenched in cold sweat. The world around them spun, blurred machinery, flickering lights, the scent of ozone and decay. They were inside the Axis engine. A cathedral of machinery stretched around them, impossibly large, built in spirals and arcs, pulsing with rhythms older than stars. Pillars of glass and copper reached into a ceiling lost in smoke. Gears the size of buildings turned slowly with no sound. Time was not flowing here. It was being manufactured. Where are we? Sarah gasped. Ansel slowly stood, clutching his side. Not when. Where? The Axis engine isn't bound by time. This is the core of all causality, the place from which every version of the universe is spun. Before them stood a control column, rising like an obelisk of dark crystal. Thousands of tiny shards hovered in orbit around it, each one glowing with a different shade of memory. Sarah reached toward one, and it pulsed, displaying a flicker of a life. Her as a violinist, playing to an empty theater after the collapse of civilization. Another showed her as a revolutionary, blood on her hands, eyes full of fire. I can feel them, she whispered. Every choice I never made. Every version of me, waiting. Ansel stared at the column. This is the convergence node. It's what the warden meant. We can't go back. We have to become. A low tone echoed through the chamber. The shards began to spin faster. Above, a holographic form coalesced, tall, robed, faceless. Unlike the warden, this entity had no warmth. Its presence was like a verdict passed down before a trial ever began. You have entered the Axis. Ansel straightened. Are you the engine? I am function. I am convergence. I am the selection. Sarah stepped forward. Then tell us, what must we do? The shards around the column froze. Then, one by one, they began drifting toward the entity, forming a ring of lives. You must choose no more. The engine will calculate. One thread, one future. All else discarded. A console rose from the floor between them. Symbols formed, some alien, some familiar. A countdown began, ticking down from 300 seconds. Ansel's throat tightened. That's the convergence timer. Sarah's voice trembled. And if we don't complete the process by then, variants collapse. Unreality will breach. Ansel began scanning the interface. Each symbol represented a version of himself, a possible thread. He could feel them, like blood memories whispering beneath the skin. One version had cured cancer, another had murdered millions. Some were too painful to look at, others too seductive. Sarah's hands hovered over the console. This isn't fair. We're being asked to erase who we might have become. We're being asked to choose who we will be, Ansel said. Every other version of us, good or bad, goes silent forever. As the countdown reached 240 seconds, the chamber trembled. The keepers were trying to breach the engine. Reality began to stutter. Objects flickered in and out of existence. A set of stairs vanished, then returned upside down. Sarah's eyes flashed. If we pick the wrong self, we might lose who we are entirely. No self is wrong, the engine said. Only more stable. The console began highlighting options. One of Ansel's variants was a cold, hyperlogical AI hybrid, emotionless, efficient. Another was a monk who had walked away from technology and rebuilt society with compassion. Another had become something else entirely, light and frequency, no longer human. I don't want to lose myself, Sarah said, but I don't want the version who let the world die either. Ansel nodded, eyes locked on his own reflections. We have to trust the version of us that can handle the truth, the one that can carry what we've seen. The countdown hit 180 seconds. The engine spoke, you may submit to auto-selection, or force a hand bind. Sarah turned to Ansel. Auto-selection means we don't choose. He met her eyes. Hand bind? The floor lit up beneath them. Two symbols appeared, interlock and override. If we interlock, Ansel said slowly, our lives fuse into a single narrative, one person made from both of us. Sarah blinked. One being? He nodded. A hybrid, not just memories, but essence. We'd stop being separate people. The countdown hit 120. And override? She asked. One of us chooses, the other is erased. The silence between them was devastating. Sarah swallowed. You'd still do it, wouldn't you? If you had to? I'd rather let the universe end than erase you, he whispered. Her hand shook. Then we interlock. They stepped forward together. The engine paused. Subjects choose merge. Stability unknown. Convergence will commence. The shards swirled like a storm around them. Each version of them, every possibility, rushed into their minds like a flood. They saw love and death, hope and despair. They were mothers, fathers, killers, saints. They remembered every road taken and not taken, every moment where they chose the light or didn't. And then it stopped. They stood in silence. The chamber was still. Sarah was gone. Ansel was gone. In their place stood a new being, neither male nor female, neither past nor future. A fusion. A singular mind carrying the weight of every version. It opened its eyes, and the Axis engine recognized it. Convergence complete. But peace did not come. Because outside the engine, something stirred. something that had waited for convergence, something that had fed on the broken versions and now wanted the final thread. Silence reigned in the chamber of the Axis engine. After the convergence, not a single gear turned, not a single light flickered. Even the distant ticking of time had stopped, as though the universe itself was holding its breath. The being that once was Ansel and Sarah stood at the core, clothed in silence and surrounded by ghostly remnants of futures that would never be. They, no longer thought in individual terms. The convergence had fused thought, instinct, and memory into one. A new identity formed from contradiction, compromise, and clarity. But something was wrong. The Axis engine pulsed once, then stuttered. A faint vibration trembled through the floor, not mechanical, but alive. The being turned its head slowly. Somewhere beyond the engine's walls, the fabric of space-time quivered, as if something vast and hungry were brushing against it. Something that had been waiting, not to prevent convergence, but to feed on its result. Then they heard it. A sound that didn't reach the ears, but the soul, a scream that had never been born, a story cut short, a reality that was never allowed to become real. It wasn't just one voice, it was millions, woven into a howl of cosmic hunger. The Thread Eater had arrived. In forgotten corners of pre-human memory, the ancients whispered of beings not just from outside time, but outside meaning. Creatures that fed on narrative weight, erasing timelines not for war, not for malice, but for sustenance. They weren't invaders, they were predators. And the convergence had sent up a signal, like blood in the water. The newly merged entity took a breath, out of habit, not need. It's here. The Axis engine groaned. The vast pillars around them dimmed. The crystal interface fractured. From high above, a tear appeared, not in space, but in story. A jagged rip through cause and effect, like someone had taken a razor blade to the spine of reality itself. Through it slithered a form made of null, its body stitched together from aborted timelines, black holes of choice. Eyes that weren't eyes scanned the chamber. Where it looked, things simply stopped being. The Thread Eater dropped from the rift like a nightmare given gravity. It was colossal, but without mass. Its voice was not a sound, but the absence of all others. One story. One soul. Enough to feed a century. The merged being felt its presence like claws digging into memory. If they ran, the Axis would fall. If they fought, they would likely lose. But if they did nothing... I am not just one story, the being spoke, voice layered with Ansel's reason and Sarah's fire. I am the culmination of billions. You cannot eat what isn't finished. The Thread Eater coiled. It didn't respond with words, it lunged. Reality warped as it struck. Entire moments vanished from existence mid-thought. The merged entity dodged just barely, stumbling as time hiccuped. In one blink, the engine chamber had 3 walls, then 6, then none. The sky above turned red, then green, then featureless gray. The creature was undoing context. The being realized this wasn't just a monster, it was entropy with intent. A myth that killed myths. They focused, channeling memory. From Sarah, they summoned raw courage. From Ansel, strategic logic. From 1,000 other selves, powers barely comprehensible. The ability to slow decay, to bend sequence, to anchor meaning. A blade of light appeared in their hand. Not metal, not energy, but resolve. Forged from every version of themselves that had chosen not to give up. They charged. Their first strike sliced across the Thread Eater's flank, and for a moment something screamed. Not the creature, but the absence inside it. It recoiled, shedding splinters of broken narrative that fell like dying stars. But it was not beaten. It retaliated with a pulse that erased centuries. The being staggered, suddenly remembering lives that hadn't happened. Births undone, loves unspoken, victories that never were. The weight threatened to crush them. They almost collapsed. Almost. But then, from deep within, a voice whispered, not Sarah's, not Ansel's, but one of the quieter versions, the forgotten ones. A story only ends when someone stops telling it. They stood. Bleeding memory, burning resolve. Then they spoke aloud, not to the creature, but to the universe. I am every path walked and unwalked. I am regret and redemption. I am the unfinished story. The Axis engine responded. Lights returned, gears spun. And then something impossible happened. The being split, not into Sarah and Ansel, but into every version of themselves at once. Thousands of forms. Soldiers, poets, scientists, lovers, monsters, saints, each stepped forward. The Thread Eater howled. But this time the story fought back. Each version struck, not with weapons, but with truth. with choice, with possibility, with the refusal to be erased. The Thread Eater screamed as its form cracked. It tried to retreat. Too late. The merged entity pulled all its versions together for one final blow. With the weight of infinite selves behind it, the sword of resolve pierced the heart of the beast, and it vanished. Not with a bang, not with glory, just silence. Like a book closed gently after the final page. The Axis engine calmed, reality reset, and only one version of the being remained, trembling, whole, and alone. Their eyes opened, and for the first time since the convergence, they felt peace. But deep within the Axis, something stirred. A single shard that had not fused. A story not yet told. Time no longer passed the way it used to. After defeating the Thread Eater, the merged being, who now called itself Solace, found the Axis engine oddly quiet, almost compliant. No more tremors, no more distortions. It was like a planet after the storm, devastated but eerily still. Solace wandered the infinite corridors of the engine, guided only by intuition. They had no map, no destination, but something pulled at them, a tug in their chest, a whisper at the edge of understanding. Eventually they found a staircase that shouldn't have existed. It spiraled downward forever, cutting through layers of quantum frost, ancient coding, and something that felt suspiciously like memory fossilized into stone. Solace descended for what could have been hours or centuries. At the bottom stood a gate made of language itself, every word ever spoken, every secret ever kept. Carved into its surface was a phrase that burned itself into Solace's mind. Only the forgotten may enter the citadel. Solace stepped forward, and immediately a piece of them vanished. Not a limb, not a thought, a memory. Their father's voice. It was gone, irretrievable. They recoiled, horrified, but the door opened. Inside was the Citadel of Memory, a place older than the Axis engine, older than time, possibly even older than consciousness itself. It was not built, but grown, shaped by the combined recollections of trillions of lives from across the multiverse. Its walls pulsed softly with memories, some joyful, others so painful they threatened to drown the soul. Solace moved carefully through the hallways, their footsteps echoing like forgotten lullabies. Each room was a life, each corridor a story unfinished. In one chamber, a child painted stars with their breath. In another, a woman wept over a photograph that no longer depicted anyone. Solace felt them all, a tsunami of emotion rising inside them, compassion, grief, awe, and then they saw it. The core, a throne, not for ruling but for remembering. Suspended above it was a living lattice of thought, the collective mind, a sentient archive of every sentient being that had ever lived and died, and everyone that had never had the chance to. The moment Solace approached, the lattice flared awake. You are not a god. The voice was not singular. It was millions speaking in perfect harmony. You are a consequence. Solace bowed their head. I didn't come to rule. I came to understand. The lattice shifted. Lights pulsed. Why do you exist? Solace answered honestly, because someone had to, because choice matters, because no single version of a life is enough. The lattice paused, then a tendril of light reached toward them, touching their forehead. Suddenly, Solace was inside the collective mind. They were a soldier watching his city burn, a scientist injecting herself with nanites to save her son, an AI begging not to be deleted, a god watching his last worshiper die, a planet mourning the loss of its moons. All of it, all of them, inside. Solace screamed, but no sound escaped. It wasn't pain, it was magnitude. Too many lives, too much meaning. The lattice released them, and they collapsed to their knees. Do you still wish to understand? Solace whispered, yes. And the collective showed them the truth. There was a balance to the multiverse, between memory and oblivion, creation and collapse. The Thread Eater had been just one side of the equation. Now that it was gone, the balance was breaking. Without an agent of forgetting, the universe had begun to bloat. Too many timelines, too many stories. Reality was expanding faster than it could sustain. The result? Immortality. But not the kind mortals dream of. Immortality of everything. No endings, no closure. Every mistake lingering, every trauma echoing, nothing dying, nothing releasing. A suffocating eternity. And Solace? They were now the linchpin. The only being who could act outside of causality. The only one who remembered every thread without being torn apart. You want me to fix this? Solace said, standing. No. Then why show me? We cannot decide. You must choose. That's when Solace saw it. a mirror floating just beyond the throne, but it did not show their face. It showed two, Ansel and Sarah, separated, restored, alive again, but only if Solace surrendered their unity. If they shattered themselves, they could give rise to new convergences, restore entropy, allow forgetting to return, but in doing so, they would cease to exist. Solace, the combined being, would vanish, like a dream finally released. They looked at the mirror. Ansel smiled faintly. Sarah mouthed something. "It's okay." And for the first time in a long, long while, Solace wept, not out of fear, but release. They stepped toward the mirror, and the citadel began to collapse. The collapse of the citadel was not destruction, it was rebirth. As Solace stepped into the mirror, the structure that had stood outside of time for billions of subjective years unraveled, not in flames, but in light. The walls turned to memories, the throne dissolved into music, the very floor beneath them became a chorus of forgotten names, and then, silence. Solace floated in nothingness. No shape, no form, not even thought, only decision. Their essence was unraveling. Sarah and Ansel were reforming somewhere in the collapsing multiverse, pulled into new roles, new identities, rippling across realities like echoes learning to speak again. Solace was disappearing, but the universe hesitated. Something stirred, not the Thread Eater, not the collective. This was something deeper, older, the intent. A presence that did not speak with words or light or time, it simply was. And in its stillness, it posed a question. If you must die to restore balance, then who watches the ones who remember too much? The thought cracked through Solace like lightning in water. They were meant to die, to split. But in doing so, who would carry the knowledge of what had been saved, of what had been sacrificed? The balance required forgetting, but understanding was what made forgetting matter. Something else began to take shape in the void. A third path, neither unity nor division. Neither godhood nor dissolution, but transcendence. The intent pulsed, not like a heart, but like a thought forming inside the brain of the universe. And suddenly Solace felt themselves pulled inward, not backward into life, not forward into death, but sideways into something unwritten. A new dimension unfolded, one that had been locked away from all other beings. It was called the Archive of Becoming. No door marked its entrance, no map described its position. It was not space. It was not time, it was possibility. Solace floated above an endless sea of doors, each one leading to a different universe. Not the ones that had been or would be, but ones that could be. This was where the universe kept its dreams. A whisper echoed, "Guard them." It was not command, it was a trust. And so Solace was reborn, not as one being, not as two, but as the Keeper. The first and only sentinel of unrealized realities. They would not rule. They would rule, they would watch, they would remember what no one else could. Because there had to be someone who carried the weight of what could have gone wrong. Someone who would stop another Thread Eater before it formed. Someone who would prevent hope from collapsing under its own infinity. And so the Keeper walked the archive, silently cataloging unborn worlds. A universe where humanity made peace with machine kind. A reality where stars sang in codes of love. A timeline where death was optional, but grief remained sacred. Each dream was fragile, each possibility sacred. They watched over them not like a warden, but like a gardener. And one day, far away in a branch of the archive, they saw a door glowing brighter than the others. It pulsed, beckoning. They approached. The plaque read, Sarah, version 41, Ansel, version 122, rejoined on Earthglass 9. The Keeper hesitated, their hand touched the door, it opened, and they stepped through. The Keeper stepped into the door of Earthglass 9 and found themselves in a world eerily familiar, yet impossibly serene. The sky was a shade of blue no spectrum could name. Trees sang in harmonic pulses, cities floated, not on engines, but on agreements. There were no walls here, only bridges. And the people, they did not wear weapons or names. They wore memories, exchanged like currency, honored like art. This was a world where Sarah and Ansel had rejoined, not through cosmic fusion, but through choice. In this timeline, they were not godlike nor broken. They were whole, human. She was a linguist who decoded emotion into light. He was an architect who built gravity-tempered homes that healed with time. They lived on the edge of the murmuring sea, in a house shaped like a question mark, curved, curious, and never quite finished. The Keeper watched from beyond perception. They weren't visible, but they could feel everything. And in this world, Sarah and Ansel were happy. They argued, yes, but the kind of arguments that taught, not tore. They cried sometimes, but together. They dreamed, and let those dreams touch the sky without fearing they'd fall back broken. And then, on the anniversary of their first meeting, they climbed the Tower of Soft Winds, a spire so tall it whispered to orbit. Sarah looked out over the world and said, "Do you ever wonder what we were before this?" Ansel didn't answer right away, but when he did, his voice was steady. "I think we were fragments, searching." She smiled. "And now, we're still searching," he said, "but now we search together." The keeper felt something stir inside, not longing, not envy, but closure. They had seen universes burned, stories devoured, futures shattered by ambition, fear, and entropy. But here was a reality earned, not inherited. This world had not escaped suffering. It had learned to tend it, and in that tending, it had grown something sacred. Peace without stagnation, love without illusion, progress without conquest. The keeper turned away from the tower. Their work here was done. As they drifted back into the archive of becoming, they passed doors pulsing with quiet potential. Realities waiting to be born. A world where Earth never knew war. A timeline where children dreamed their own ancestors. A universe where silence was not absence, but presence. And finally, as they reached the heart of the archive, they paused. Floating there was a new door, one that had not been there before. It bore no name, only a phrase etched in soft gold, a story not yet told. The keeper smiled, they reached out and stepped through. The story continues, wherever someone dares to dream it. Thank you for joining us on this journey across time, memory, and meaning. If this story moved you, made you think, or simply gave you a moment to dream, please leave a like, subscribe to the channel, and share your thoughts in the comments below. Your support keeps the universe turning, one story at a time. Until next time, stay curious, stay human.